Master luthier and inlay artist David Nichols has been perfecting the art of building and inlaying stringed instruments for over 40 years. He's also dedicated to passing on his knowledge, mostly to other musicians who come from all over North America to learn from him in his workshop near Malone, New York. I visited the master craftsman to learn more.
I grew up in a wood shop. My father was a gunsmith and built boats and carved decoys, and I always liked guitar music and liked instruments. And in a high school wood shop, I built my first guitar, and the instructor let me because he knew of my shop background.
How did you continue to learn and evolve your guitar building technique?
When I started building and started doing inlay, I had no one to turn to for answers. There were so few guitar builders, and those that were the old school of, I'm not telling you what I know because, you know, this is how I make my living. And over the years, first of all, coming from a shop background, I devised ways of overcoming the obstacles of how do you bend sides, how do we make it sound good. And I learned by taking guitars apart. And my very first guitar was a $35 from a local Messina music store that really wasn't great, but I took it apart to see. That was how I got the plans to make another one, and changed what I thought ought to be changed. And every time I changed something, I tried to change it a little bit and see if the sound was better or worse. And sometimes a little change gave me a radical change in sound. And so I experimented over the years to see what is it that is going to influence the sound of an instrument that I make, and what kind of a sound is it that I want to get. When we're making an instrument, if I'm making a mandolin and I use a board that's this purple color, I will have more purple colored boards that we've saved to use for the bracing, so that the brace wood inside is exactly the same wood as the top. And it means that my densities from one to the other don't change, and it makes it much easier to tune an instrument for what's going on.
So you're making sure it comes from actually this very same log?
Very same log, very same spot in the very same log. A 6-string guitar has more forces exerted on it than you can imagine. Each string exerts about 30 pounds of pull. And so you've got 180 pounds of pull trying to destroy a delicate instrument. And when you think of it as a person almost sitting on the guitar, that's what it has to withstand, and yet it has to be light enough to vibrate. So the art of how lightly can I brace this for sound, and how strong do I have to leave it to make it withstand not only the tension of the strings, but the abuse that people heap upon it, and the weather changes, and therein lies the balance.
Pearl inlay has been used to ornament woodwork, including musical instruments, for centuries. Dave learned the art as an apprentice in his father's gunsmith shop, and for decades he was one of the only inlay artists in the country. For years he did all the inlay work for Martin Guitars, and still fills their custom orders. His workshop walls and ceilings are decorated with signed photos and letters from grateful customers like Merle Haggard, Aerosmith, and ZZ Top.
For me, the proudest achievement was making Johnny Cash's first fancy guitar. Johnny Cash was a hero of mine when I was very young, and continued to be a force in the music industry up until he died. So here was a man who spanned most of my life, and I had the honor of making this. And he was Man in Black. Everything was plain for him. Well, I made his first fancy guitar, and it had his signature in the peg head inlaid too.
In recent years, guitar manufacturers have turned to new computer technology to mass produce their inlay work. But Dave continues to hand-cut original designs from shell and even woolly mammoth tusk. Over the years, he's passed on this skill to a few apprentices, who are now master craftsmen in their own right.
The really start of apprentice, if you will, started 15 or more years ago, when this young man came to my door and told me he was an artist and would like to work here. And I took him in, and he's still here. and he is arguably the best in the world at what he does. We put out inlay that people really, we have to photograph it being done to convince people it's not machine done.
Well, what we do, like the hand cutting, I think is the traditional way of doing it. So it's been passed on from different people like Dave to me. And so as far as that kind of goes, the technique is kind of an old technique. But I can like look at my work and see that and tell a difference, like from when I cut something from when Dave cuts something. So I do have my own like technique and way of maybe fitting pearl together and way of drawing things up as well, like the design work. I've got a different technique because everyone's got a different design sense. And it shouldn't be physical. If it's physical, then you're not doing it right. I think that's why I center myself over my cutting board and my blade. And you want your body to just naturally fall in a certain position where you're not thinking about holding the saw straight, it just naturally does it. And I can move my chair half an inch one way, and my body position just makes the saw go crooked. So it's very important to find that like center point.
I built my first guitar in 1959, so in 2009 we decided to make a 50th anniversary guitar. And this particular one, there's nothing standard about it. Those are real sapphires set in gold in the pins, and you'll notice that everything is inlaid. The predominant color of the inlay on this is a gold color, because being a 50th anniversary, I wanted it to have some significance. The pattern is one that we developed quite a few years ago, back in the early 70s. And the back represents inlay art. A picture of me when I was in high school in 1959, and a picture of me in 2009. And these are just pieces of wood. Everything on this guitar was done not just by me, but by the crew of us that work in the shop. Tracy Cox, Keith Sloat, Dowden, Lee Mulverhill, myself, and a cast of others who've been in. Everybody had a hand in helping to build the guitar.
It was a love of rock and roll and country music that drew Dave to build his first guitar. And this love of music is still one of the driving forces behind Dave's work. He and his wife Nadine spend the spring and summer traveling to bluegrass festivals with their band, Dave Nichols and Spare Change, and the shop is often filled with the sound of impromptu jam sessions or music lessons.
You have found another. Oh, darling, please don't say it's too late now.
I used to go duck hunting with my father in the early mornings, and at that time of the morning, WWVA Wheeling, West Virginia was the radio station that would come in, and Dad listened to cowboy music, country cowboy music, and that was just one of my favorites. So we heard Lee Moore, the coffee-drinking Nighthawk, and grew up listening to that type of music.
Into a home where joys will never end. I'll fly away.
Working in my shop, in the winter months, we're in here 6-7 days a week making guitars and doing inlay and staying very busy. Come spring, I'm ready to be on the road. And we're on the road every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, traveling to the bluegrass festivals. And the building instruments for the next season is fun in the shop, and it all ties together, and we meet so many interesting people.
While many of the world's greatest guitar players own instruments made or inlaid by Dave Nichols, he has also taught hundreds of amateur musicians the basics of guitar building and inlay. His workshop is filled with mementos from students and fellow musicians, not just the rich and famous. Thanks to his generosity in teaching, the traditional arts of lutherie and hand-cut inlay, as well as the time-honored master-apprentice tradition, are alive and well.
Lutherie had always been my one thing I could do that at the end of the day you had something tangible to look at. And so many jobs nowadays, you don't know whether you're winning, losing, on the side of right, on the side of wrong, or are you making a difference. And when you're doing inlay or guitar building, every day at the end of the day you can look and say, today I did this. And it's a tangible, positive reinforcement that can carry you over into the next day. Somebody will be building a guitar and I say, well, do you want to take 5 minutes to learn how to play mandolin? Well, yes. And it's always a series of ongoing education here. You come to build a guitar and you walk out learning some new music tricks, you walk out with a guitar, you walk out with a different appreciation for an instrument because you can see what went into it.